2 seconds before the Millionaire'S civil wedding, the maid reveals the wife's scheme. Thomas Wilson took a deep breath as he awaited the final words from the judge that would seal his second marriage. At 55 years old, the real estate businessman had found love again after 5 years of widowhood, and nothing could ruin that special moment. That's when Betty Johnson, the housekeeper who had worked in his home for 22 years, burst through the courthouse door with crumpled papers in her trembling hands. The face of the 62-year-old woman was paler than Thomas had ever seen, and her eyes held a mixture of desperation and determination that made the businessman's blood run cold in his veins. "Mr. Thomas, for God's sake, you can't sign these papers," shouted Betty Johnson, breathless from having run there. The bride, Jennifer Brooks, an elegant 42-year-old woman he had met 6 months earlier at a Kiwanis Club charity event, turned abruptly to the maid. Her brown eyes, which until then had shone with happiness, now showed poorly disguised irritation. "Betty, have you lost your mind?" said Jennifer, trying to maintain composure in front of the few guests present. "Get out of here immediately." Thomas raised his hand, asking for calm, but he could feel his heart speeding up. In all the years Betty Johnson had worked for him, he had never seen her lose her composure like that. The woman who had taken care of his home and his late wife Catherine had always been discreet and respectful. "Betty, what's going on?" asked Thomas, still holding the pen that would sign the marriage certificate. "Mr. Thomas, I found some things in Ms. Jennifer's room that you need to see," said Betty, extending the crumpled papers. "I didn't want to interfere, but I can't let you do this without knowing the truth." Jennifer took a step forward, trying to take the papers from the maid's hands. "This is an invasion of privacy. Thomas, make this woman leave right now." But Thomas had already taken the documents from Betty Johnson. His eyes quickly scanned the pages, and what he saw made his legs go weak. It was a valid marriage certificate, dated 15 years ago, between Jennifer Brooks Anderson and a man named Robert Craig Miller. "Jennifer, you're married?" asked Thomas, his voice coming out softer than he intended. The courthouse fell silent. The judge, embarrassed, stepped back a few steps. The few guests present began to murmur among themselves. Jennifer opened and closed her mouth several times before managing to respond. "Thomas, I can explain. Yes, I was married, but it's all over for years. Robert abandoned me and disappeared. I'm divorced in practice, just not on paper." Betty Johnson shook her head negatively and pulled another document from inside her apron. "Ms. Jennifer, I'm sorry, Ma'am, but this here says something else," she said, showing a sheet with printed messages. "You were talking to him just yesterday. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing." Thomas took the printouts and read the messages between Jennifer and Robert. They talked about the plan working perfectly and about splitting the money after everything was over. His hands began to tremble. "Jennifer, what does this mean?" The woman he believed he loved began to cry, but Thomas could no longer tell if they were genuine tears or an act. "Thomas, please let me explain." "Yes, I talk to Robert sometimes, but it's not what you're thinking. He blackmails me, he threatens me. I was trying to get rid of him so we could live our lives in peace." Betty Johnson cleared her throat and pulled more papers from her apron, like a magician pulling doves from a top hat. "Mr. Thomas, there's more. I found this in her room," she said, showing handwritten notes. "These are notes about your properties, your investments, even about where you keep Mrs. Catherine's jewels." Thomas's blood rushed to his head. Catherine's jewels were sacred to him, the only physical memories left of their 30 years of marriage. Jennifer knew this. "Jennifer, did you touch Catherine's jewels?" he asked, his voice heavy with a pain that cut through the air. "No. Thomas, you have to believe me. I just wanted to know your life better, understand who you are. These notes, I made them because I wanted to be a good wife, take good care of everything." But Betty Johnson wasn't finished. The housekeeper, who had known Thomas for over 2 decades, knew exactly how that situation was destroying the man she considered almost a son. "Mr. Thomas, there's something I need to tell you that's even worse," she said, her voice choked. "Last night, I overheard a phone call from Ms. Jennifer. She was talking about getting rid of me after the wedding." Jennifer turned even paler. That's a lie. Betty, why are you doing this to me? Because I can't let this good man be deceived, shouted Betty Johnson, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Mr. Thomas took me in when I needed it most, took care of me when I was sick, paid for my granddaughter's hospital. I can't let you destroy him. Thomas looked at Jennifer, trying to find in her eyes the woman he had fallen in love with. But all he saw now was a stranger. Jennifer, look me in the eye and tell me the truth, just the truth. Are you deceiving me? Jennifer hesitated for a moment too long. In that silence, Thomas found his answer. Thomas, I can explain everything. Yes, when we met I had other interests, but then I truly fell in love with you. What I feel is real. The judge, realizing the situation had gotten completely out of control, decided to intervene. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest this ceremony be postponed until all matters are clarified. Thomas nodded, still in shock. He headed for the exit of the courthouse, but Jennifer grabbed his arm. Thomas, please, don't go. Give me a chance to explain everything properly. Jennifer, you lied about being divorced. You made notes about my assets. You planned to fire the only person I have left from my family. What else do you want me to hear? The whole truth, said a male voice from the door. Everyone turned to see a man of about 45, thin and in simple clothes, standing at the entrance of the courthouse. Jennifer turned white as a sheet. Robert, what are you doing here? The man entered with a cynical smile on his lips. I came to get my share, darling. Or did you think I'd let you keep everything? Thomas felt the world spinning around him. Not only was Jennifer married, but her husband had shown up to claim his share of the scam. Who are you? Thomas asked. I'm her husband, the real one, and I came to tell you how my wife's scheme works. Jennifer tried to approach Robert, but he pushed her away gently. Don't try to shut me up, Jennifer. You, sir, he said, pointing to Thomas, need to know that my wife has a special talent for finding rich widowed men. This isn't the first time. Betty Johnson, who had remained silent watching the scene until then, let out a muffled scream. My God in heaven! Mr. Thomas, is she not a first-time scammer? Robert laughed bitterly. First time? Jennifer has done this 3 times before. Always with older men, always widowers, always rich. The difference is that this time she took too long and got attached. Thomas felt his legs go weak and leaned on a chair. Everything he had believed in for the past 6 months was collapsing like a house of cards. Jennifer, is this true? Jennifer was crying profusely now, but Thomas could no longer feel sorry for her. Thomas, I know it seems terrible, but this time it's different. I really fell in love with you. I was trying to get out of this kind of life. Get out? Shouted Robert. You promised me this would be the last scam and that afterward we would move abroad. You're not getting out of anything. Betty Johnson approached Thomas and held his hand. Mr. Thomas, you need to call the police. No, Thomas said firmly. I won't call the police. I just want all of you out of my life, now. But Thomas, Jennifer began. No, shouted Thomas, finally exploding. You lied about everything. About being divorced, about your feelings, about your intentions. You studied my life as if I were a business project. You planned to get rid of the only person I have left in this world. I don't want to hear another word from you. Robert crossed his arms. What about my money? Jennifer promised me a share of what she got here. Your money? Thomas laughed bitterly. You won't see a penny of mine. Now get out, both of you, before I change my mind about not calling the police. Jennifer made one last attempt. Thomas, just listen to me for 5 minutes. I know I made mistakes, but my feelings for you are real. I was trying to find a way out of this life without hurting you. Without hurting me? Thomas stared at her with a mix of pain and anger. Jennifer, you shattered my heart. You made me believe in love again after 5 years of loneliness. You made me think that Catherine had sent me an angel to take care of me, and it was all just a calculated lie. Betty Johnson squeezed Thomas's hand tighter. Let's go home, Mr. Thomas. Let's get out of here. But Jennifer didn't give up easily. She threw herself to her knees in front of Thomas. Please, Thomas, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to prove I've changed, that my feelings are real. Jennifer, get up from there, said Robert, embarrassed. You're making a fool of yourself. Shut up, Robert, shouted Jennifer. You ruined everything. I was trying to find a way to be honest with Thomas, but you wouldn't let me." "Honest?" Robert laughed sarcastically. "Jennifer, you spent 6 months deceiving this man. What honesty is that?" Thomas watched the argument between the two and felt a mix of disgust and sadness. Those people were arguing about his life as if he were just an object. "Enough," said Thomas, his voice low but firm. "Betty, let's go." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. He headed for the door of the notary's office, but Jennifer followed him. "Thomas, you can't just leave like this. We had plans, dreams together." "Plans?" Thomas turned to her. "Jennifer, all our plans were based on lies. How can I build anything with a person who deceived me from day one?" "Because people can change," shouted Jennifer. "I changed, Thomas. You made me change." Robert approached the couple. "Jennifer, stop the drama. The game is over. Now let's focus on what matters. Mr. Thomas, I have proof that my wife sold the jewelry you gave her. That's a crime, you know." Thomas stopped walking. The jewelry he had given Jennifer were some pieces that Catherine used to wear occasionally, not the family heirlooms, but they still had sentimental value. "Jennifer, did you sell the jewelry I gave you?" Jennifer lowered her head. "I needed money to pay off some debts." "What debts?" Robert answered for her. "Debts with me, Mr. Thomas. She owed me money from other jobs I was collecting with interest." Thomas felt a wave of disgust rise from his stomach. Not only had Jennifer lied about everything, but she was being blackmailed by her own husband. "Betty, let's go," said Thomas, walking decisively toward the exit. This time neither Jennifer nor Robert tried to stop him. The notary's office fell silent, except for Jennifer's muffled sobs. In the car on the way home, Betty Johnson broke the silence. "Mr. Thomas, I'm so sorry for waiting until the last moment to tell you everything. I should have spoken sooner." Thomas drove in silence, still processing everything that had happened. The streets of New York City passed by the window like a blur, and he felt as if he were watching someone else's life. "Betty, you did the right thing. If it weren't for you, I would have signed those papers and found out everything too late. But you're hurting, I can see that." Thomas stopped at a traffic light and finally looked at the housekeeper who had saved him from financial and emotional ruin. "I am hurting, yes, but I'd rather suffer with the truth than live a happy lie." "You will get through this, Mr. Thomas. You are a strong man." Thomas smiled sadly. "I thought I had found a companion for my final years, Betty. Someone to share memories with, to take care of me when I got old. Now I feel like a fool." "You are not a fool. You are a good-hearted man who believed in love. That is not a flaw." When they arrived home, a mansion in the Upper East Side that Thomas had bought in the 80s, he went straight to his study. Betty Johnson followed him, worried. "Mr. Thomas, would you like me to prepare something for you to eat?" "I'm not hungry, Betty, thank you." Thomas poured himself a whiskey and sat in the leather armchair that had belonged to his father. He looked at the photos of Catherine scattered on the bookshelf and felt a tightness in his chest. "Catherine, I betrayed your memory," he murmured to the photo of his wife. "I brought a con artist into our home." Betty Johnson, who had stayed by the door, approached. "Mr. Thomas, Mrs. Catherine wouldn't have wanted you to be alone forever. She would have wanted you to be happy. But not with a liar, Betty. Not with someone who only wanted my money." "Of course not. But that doesn't mean you should give up on love." Thomas took a sip of the whiskey and felt the liquid burn his throat. "Betty, I'm 55 years old. How many more chances will I have to find someone?" "You don't know what the future holds, Mr. Thomas, but one thing I can guarantee. Mrs. Jennifer did not deserve you." Thomas spent the following days trying to return to his normal routine, but everything reminded him of Jennifer: the coffee mug she used in the mornings, the side of the bed where she slept when she stayed over, the perfume that still lingered in the air of the guest room where she kept her clothes. Betty Johnson did her best to keep him distracted, preparing his favorite meals and insisting that he not cancel his social engagements. But Thomas was clearly devastated. A week after the incident at the notary's office, Jennifer showed up at the door of the mansion. Betty Johnson answered the intercom. "Mrs. Jennifer, Mr. Thomas does not want to see you. Betty, please, I just need 5 minutes. I have important things to say to him. You have already said enough, Mrs. Jennifer. It's best if you don't insist. But Jennifer did not give up. She remained outside the gate for hours, until Thomas finally came down to speak with her. Jennifer, what do you want? She was visibly distraught. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and had deep, dark circles under her eyes. Thomas, I want to give everything back to you. The jewelry I sold, the money you spent on me, everything. I don't want your money, Jennifer. I just want you out of my life. Thomas, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to know that I've changed. These last few days have been the worst of my life. I lost the only man I ever truly loved. Thomas watched her through the gate bars. Jennifer truly looked destroyed, but he couldn't trust anything that came from her anymore. Jennifer, how can I believe you? You lied about everything. Your marital status, your intentions, your past. How can I know you're not lying now, too? Because I'm willing to prove it, said Jennifer, taking some papers out of her bag. I filed for divorce, and I also made a statement at the police station about everything Robert forced me to do. Thomas took the papers through the bars and examined them. They were authentic legal documents. Jennifer, this changes nothing. You still deceived me. I know, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But Thomas, I'm asking for a second chance. Not for us to go back to how we were, but for me to prove that I've changed. And how do you plan to do that? Jennifer took a deep breath. By letting you get to know who I really am, without lies, without disguises. Even if it's painful, even if you hate me even more. Thomas looked at Betty Johnson, who had approached and was listening to the conversation. Mr. Thomas, the decision is yours. But remember that everyone deserves a second chance, even those who make terrible mistakes. Betty, you defend her after everything that happened. I don't defend what she did, Mr. Thomas, but I defend people's right to change. If she wants to prove she's changed, maybe it's worth listening. Thomas remained silent for a long moment. Part of him wanted to send Jennifer away forever, but another part was curious to know who she really was. Jennifer, if I give you this chance, it will be on my terms. You will tell me everything about your past, you will explain every lie you told me, and you will introduce me to the person you really are. And that might be more painful for me than simply never seeing you again. I'll accept anything, Thomas. I just want the chance to be honest with you. Thomas opened the gate, but raised his hand when Jennifer tried to approach. You will not enter my house. If you want to talk, it will be here in the garden with Betty present, and at the first sign of a lie, you leave and never come back. Jennifer nodded, visibly relieved to have gotten at least this opportunity. They sat on the stone bench in the garden, with Betty Johnson remaining nearby. Jennifer took a deep breath before beginning. Thomas, my real name is Jennifer Brooks Anderson, that's true, but almost everything else I told you was a lie. I'm not from a traditional Boston family. I grew up in a slum in Queens. Thomas felt a knot in his stomach, not because Jennifer was from a humble background, but because of another lie uncovered. Go on. My father abandoned me when I was 5, and my mother died when I was 15. I was raised by my grandmother, who took in laundry to support us. When she died, I was 19 and completely alone in the world. And Robert? Jennifer lowered her head. I met Robert when I was 20. He was a few years older and seemed to have money. I married him thinking I would have a better life, but I soon found out he lived off small scams. He taught me how to deceive people. Thomas felt a twinge of pity, but forced himself to keep his guard up. And the other men he mentioned? There were 3 cases before you, Thomas. Always older men, always widowers, always with money. I would get close, win them over, get married, and after a while disappear with whatever I could take. Robert always kept the largest share. Betty Johnson shook her head, outraged. My God, how many people have you fooled? I know it's horrible, Betty. I know you must think I'm a terrible person, but I want you to understand that I never felt good doing this. It was survival, not choice. Mr. Thomas interrupted her. Jennifer, don't try to justify the unjustifiable. You chose to do this. You could have chosen to work honestly. You're right, said Jennifer, tears streaming down her face. There's no justification. I made wrong choices and hurt innocent people. But Thomas, when I met you, something changed in me. What changed? For the first time in my life, I felt truly loved, not as an object of desire or a convenient companion, but as a person. You treated me with affection, with respect. You cared about what I thought and felt. Thomas shook his head. But you were pretending to be someone else. How could I love you if I didn't know who you were? I know it sounds contradictory, but it started as pretense and became real. I began to wish I could truly be the person I was pretending to be for you. And when were you going to tell me the truth? Jennifer hesitated. I was trying to find a way. I was trying to get rid of Robert first, so I could be honest with you. But he wouldn't leave me alone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer, you had 6 months to tell me the truth. 6 months where you were being affectionate with me while planning to rob me. I know, Thomas, and that's the part that shames me the most, because for the last 2 months, I wasn't planning to rob you anymore. I was planning how to leave that life and be worthy of you. Betty Johnson spoke up. And why didn't you tell the truth then? Because I was afraid of losing him, replied Jennifer, looking directly at Thomas. I was truly in love for the first time in my life, and I was terrified that he would send me away if he knew who I really was. Thomas stood up and walked a few steps in the garden. It was clear that Jennifer was being honest now, but that made everything even more painful. Knowing that she had truly fallen in love with him made the betrayal more cruel, not less. Jennifer, do you understand what this did to me? Do you understand that I can no longer trust my own feelings? How can I know if what I feel is real, or if it's just the result of clever manipulation? Thomas, what you feel is real. What we lived together was real. Maybe it started the wrong way, but it became true. How can you be sure of that? Jennifer stood up and approached him, but kept a respectful distance. Because I know the difference. In other cases, I pretended to have feelings I didn't have. With you, I was trying to hide feelings I truly had. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Her eyes were red from crying, and he could see genuine pain there, but the wound in his heart was too fresh for him to forgive. Jennifer, even if I believe you changed, even if I believe your feelings were true, that doesn't change the fact that you betrayed me. You made a fool of me. I know, Thomas, and I will carry that guilt forever, but I'm begging for a chance to make it right, somehow. How, Jennifer? How will you make up for 6 months of lies? Jennifer took a deep breath. By being completely honest from now on, about everything, even if it hurts, even if you send me away. What else do you have to tell me? Jennifer looked at Betty Johnson and then back at Thomas. There's one more thing you need to know, and it's the worst of all. Thomas felt his stomach churn. What is it? I have a daughter, Thomas. A 17-year-old daughter I abandoned with my mother-in-law when she was 3 years old. The silence that followed was deafening. Betty Johnson brought her hand to her chest, shocked. Thomas seemed to have been punched in the stomach. A daughter, he managed to murmur. Her name is Megan, and she's living with Robert's mother in a slum in the Bronx. I send money when I can, but I never managed to be a real mother to her. Thomas sat back down on the bench, feeling his legs weaken. Jennifer, you had a daughter with me for 6 months and never mentioned you had a child. I wanted to tell you many times, Thomas, but I was afraid you'd think I was trying to use her to manipulate you, and I was also ashamed to admit I abandoned my own daughter. Why did you abandon her? Jennifer began to cry more intensely. Because I was very young and didn't know how to take care of a child. Robert said she would get in the way of our plans, and I listened to him. I made the worst choice of my life. Betty Johnson, who had remained silent until then, exploded. Miss Jennifer, you abandoned a child, a 3-year-old child. I know it's unforgivable, Betty. I know you must think I'm a monster. But I was lost. I was very young and did everything Robert told me to do." Thomas was in complete shock. Discovering that Jennifer had an abandoned daughter was the final blow. He who had always dreamed of having children with Catherine, but they never could, now discovered that the woman he loved had abandoned a child. "Jennifer, I need to be alone," he said, standing up again. "Thomas, please let me finish telling you everything." "No, Jennifer, enough, I can't listen anymore, it's too much." Jennifer approached him, desperate. "Thomas, I know it's a lot of information at once, but I need you to know that I've changed. That I want to get my daughter back, I want to be a real mother to her." "That doesn't concern me, Jennifer. That's between you and your daughter." "But it does concern you, because I wanted you to meet her. I wanted us to be a family." Thomas stopped walking and turned to her, his eyes blazing with anger. "A family, Jennifer? How can you talk about family when you abandoned your own daughter? How can I trust that you wouldn't do the same to me if things got tough?" "Because I learned from my mistakes. Because I'm not the same person I was 14 years ago. Jennifer, you abandoned a child 14 years ago, and 6 months ago you were still planning scams. That's not change, that's opportunism." Jennifer fell to her knees on the garden ground. "Thomas, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to prove I've changed. Give me a chance to be the woman you deserve." Thomas looked at her kneeling in his garden and felt a mixture of pity and disgust. The woman he had fallen in love with didn't exist. She had just been a character created to deceive him. "Jennifer, get up from there. It won't change anything." "Thomas, please, I'll do anything. Anything to prove my feelings are real." "You want to do something?" said Thomas, his voice heavy with emotion. "Then go get your daughter. Go be the mother she deserves. Stop thinking about rich men and go take care of the child you abandoned." Jennifer lifted her face, tears mixed with dirt from the garden. "And then, if I manage to get my daughter back, if I prove I can be a good mother, will you give me a second chance?" Thomas helped her up but didn't answer the question. "Jennifer, what you do with your life from now on is your problem. I won't be part of it anymore." "Thomas, don't say that. Please. Jennifer, leave. And this time, don't come back." Jennifer looked at him for a long moment as if memorizing his face. Then she turned and walked toward the gate. "Thomas," she said before leaving, "I'll prove to you that I can change. Even if you never forgive me, I'll prove it." After she left, Thomas and Betty Johnson stood in silence in the garden. The sun was setting, tinting the sky orange and pink. "Mr. Thomas, you did the right thing," Betty finally said. "Did I, Betty? Because I'm not feeling good about it." "Ms. Jennifer needs to sort out her life before she can truly love someone, and you can't be responsible for fixing her mistakes." Thomas nodded, but still felt an emptiness in his chest. Despite everything, he still loved Jennifer, or at least loved who he thought she was. "Betty, do you think people can really change?" "I think so, Mr. Thomas. But change has to come from within, not from outside. And the person has to want to change for the right reasons, not to win someone over." "And do you think Jennifer wants to change for the right reasons?" Betty Johnson thought for a moment. "I think she does want to change, but I still don't know if it's for the right reasons. Maybe she'll figure that out when she goes to get her daughter." Thomas smiled sadly. "You've always been wise, Betty." "No, Mr. Thomas, I've just lived a long time and seen a lot." They went into the house, and Thomas headed to his office. He picked up the whiskey bottle, but this time he didn't pour himself a drink. Instead, he looked at the pictures of Catherine. "Catherine, what would you do in my place?" he murmured to the photo. Of course, he got no answer, but somehow he felt that Catherine would approve of his decision. She always believed that people needed to take responsibility for their choices before they could move forward. The following days passed slowly. Thomas tried to return to his work routine, but he was clearly depressed. Betty Johnson did her best to cheer him up, but respected his silence when he needed to be alone. A week later, Thomas was in his office when Betty Johnson knocked on the door. "Mr. Thomas, there's a young lady at the door asking to speak with you." "If it's Jennifer, I already said I don't want to see her." "It's not Miss Jennifer, Mr. Thomas, it's a young girl. She said her name is Megan." Thomas looked up, surprised. Megan was the name of Jennifer's daughter. "Send her in, Betty." A few minutes later, A 17-year-old girl entered the office. She was thin, had curly hair tied in a ponytail, and wore simple but clean clothes. Her eyes were similar to Jennifer's, but carried a deep sadness. "Are you Thomas?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I am. You must be Megan." "Yes, sir. Helena's daughter. She told me where you lived." Thomas motioned for her to sit. "What do you want from me, Megan?" The girl took a deep breath before answering. "I wanted to meet the man who made my mother want to change." Thomas was surprised by the answer. "How so?" "My mother came to get me yesterday at my grandmother's house. It was the first time she sought me out in 14 years. She was crying and said she had lost the love of her life because of the mistakes she made." Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. "And what did you say to her?" "I told her she was right to have lost you, that you seemed like a decent man, and that she didn't deserve someone like that." The girl's brutal honesty left Thomas speechless. "Megan, is your mother okay?" "She's not well, Mr. Thomas, not well at all. She cried all night and said she'll spend the rest of her life trying to make up for the bad things she did." "And do you believe her?" Megan thought for a moment. "I don't know, Mr. Thomas. She abandoned me when I was little. It's hard to trust a mother who did that. But yesterday was the first time I saw her truly sorry." Thomas stood up and walked to the window. "Megan, why did you come here to tell me this?" "Because I wanted you to know that she's truly suffering, and I also wanted you to know that I won't let her use our reunion to try to win you back." Thomas turned to the girl, impressed by her maturity. "What do you mean?" "My mother said she wants to be a good mother to me to prove she's changed, but I won't be used as proof of anything. If she wants to be my mother, it'll be because she wants to, not because she wants to impress a man." Thomas smiled sadly. The daughter had inherited her mother's intelligence, but apparently hadn't inherited her dishonesty. "You're a very mature young woman, Megan." "I had to be, Mr. Thomas. When your mother abandons you at 3 years old, you learn to grow up fast. And now, will you give her a chance?" Megan sighed. "I'll see what happens. She rented a small apartment for the two of us. Said she's going to work honestly to support me. I'll give her a few months to see if she keeps her promises. And if she does, then maybe I'll let her be my real mother, but it'll take a long time for me to trust her completely." Thomas remained silent for a moment, admiring the wisdom of this girl who had grown up without a mother. "Megan, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Mr. Thomas. What do you think your mother should do to prove she's changed?" Megan thought for a long moment. "I think she should stop trying to prove anything to anyone. She should just be a good person because it's the right thing to do, not because she wants something in return." The girl's answer hit Thomas like a lightning bolt. He realized that was exactly what Jennifer was doing, trying to prove she'd changed to win him back, instead of changing simply because it was the right thing to do. "You're very wise for just 17, Megan." "I'm not wise, Mr. Thomas. I'm just tired of being deceived. And you? What will you do now?" "What do you mean?" "Will you ever forgive my mother?" Thomas sighed deeply. "I don't know, Megan. The wound is still too fresh. Maybe with time." "Do you still love her?" The question took Thomas by surprise. He hadn't allowed himself to think about his feelings since the revelation at the courthouse. "I love the person I thought she was. I don't know if I love who she really is." "And if she proves she can be the person you thought she was?" Thomas looked at the girl and saw careful hope in her eyes. It was clear that despite all the hurt, Megan wanted to believe her mother could change. "Megan, your mother will have to prove that to herself first. And to you. I can't be part of her motivation to change." "I understand, Mr. Thomas. And I think you're right." Megan stood up to leave. "Mr. Thomas, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If my mother manages to be a better person, if she manages to be a good mother to me, would you consider forgiving her? Not necessarily to be together, but just to forgive." Thomas looked at this brave girl who was trying to rebuild a relationship with the mother who had abandoned her. "Megan, I promise I'll consider it. But that will depend on many things, and it might take a long time." "I understand. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Thomas." "Megan, if you need anything, If your mother doesn't keep the promises she made, you can come to me. I won't leave you helpless." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Now I understand why my mother fell in love with you." After Megan left, Thomas remained thoughtful. The girl's visit had affected him in a way he hadn't expected. Seeing the strength and maturity of that young woman who had practically grown up alone made him think about forgiveness and second chances. Betty Johnson entered the office with a cup of coffee. "What an impressive girl, isn't she, Mr. Thomas?" "Yeah, Betty, she really is impressive. Makes you think." "Think about what?" "About how people can overcome the worst circumstances and still become good people. Are you thinking about Miss Jennifer?" Thomas took a sip of his coffee. "I'm thinking about many things, Betty. I'm wondering if the fact that Jennifer raised such a special daughter says something about her. But Ms. Jennifer abandoned the girl, Mr. Thomas. That's true, but maybe she left something good with her before she left. Or maybe Jennifer's absence itself made Megan become stronger." Betty Johnson sat in the chair across from Thomas's desk. "Mr. Thomas, are you considering forgiving Ms. Jennifer?" "I don't know, Betty. Part of me still loves her. Another part is angry. And a third part is confused." "And which part is shouting the loudest?" Thomas smiled. "The confused part, definitely. You know what I think, Mr. Thomas?" "What do you think?" "I think you should stop trying to figure out what you feel and just let time pass. Feelings become clearer with time." Thomas nodded. Betty Johnson was right, as always. The following months were a quiet routine. Thomas went back to focusing on work and started accepting social invitations he had rejected since the separation. Betty Johnson noticed he was calmer, less distressed. Every now and then, Megan would show up to visit him. She always called ahead and never stayed too long. She would tell him how her life with Jennifer was going, without going into too much detail. Thomas realized the girl was being careful not to create false hope. During one of these visits, 3 months after their first meeting, Megan seemed different. She was happier, more relaxed. "How are things with your mother, Megan?" "Better than I expected, Mr. Thomas. She's working at a clothing store and comes home every day on time. She cooks for me, asks about my studies, takes me to the doctor when I need to go." "And Robert?" "He showed up twice trying to convince her to go back to the scams. Both times she sent him away. The second time she threatened to call the police." Thomas felt a pang of, what? Pride? Hope? Is she able to support herself by working honestly? "It's hard, Mr. Thomas. The apartment is very small and basic. Sometimes there isn't enough money for some things. But she doesn't complain and doesn't try to borrow anything from anyone." "And what is your relationship like?" Megan thought for a moment. "It's still strange, Mr. Thomas. I still don't know what to call her. I can't say Mom yet, but she's trying very hard, and I'm trying to give her a chance." "That's good, Megan. Mr. Thomas, can I tell you something she did last week?" "Of course." "I caught a bad flu and had to miss a few days of school. She missed work to take care of me. When I asked if it wouldn't cause a problem, she said taking care of me was more important than any job." Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. Would the Jennifer he had known have done the same thing? He wanted to believe so. "So what did you think of that?" "It was the first time I felt truly cared for by her, you know? Not just out of obligation, but like she really cared about me." "And do you believe she cares?" "I'm starting to believe, Mr. Thomas. She's changed a lot. She doesn't wear expensive clothes anymore, doesn't talk about money, doesn't dream of a rich life. She dreams of paying for my college by working honestly." Thomas fell silent, processing the information. Was it possible that Jennifer had really changed? Was it possible that the shock of losing both him and their daughter in the same period had been enough to make her reevaluate her life? "Megan, does your mother talk about me?" The girl hesitated. "Sometimes, Mr. Thomas. But not in the way you're thinking." "What do you mean?" "She doesn't talk about wanting to get back with you. She talks about how you made her realize what kind of person she wanted to be. She says you were the first man who loved her for who she was, not for what she could offer. But she wasn't who I thought she was. No, Mr. Thomas, but she says when she was with you, she discovered who she really wanted to be, and now she's trying to become that person. Thomas stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Betty Johnson was watering the garden plants. Life was going on as normal, but he felt something changing inside him. Megan, is your mother happy? I think she's at peace, Mr. Thomas, which is different from happy. She seems relieved not to have to lie anymore, not to have to pretend to be someone else. And you, are you happy? Megan smiled for the first time since she had started visiting Thomas. I'm hopeful, Mr. Thomas. For the first time in my life, I'm hopeful about having a real family. After Megan left, Thomas became thoughtful. The transformation the girl described in Jennifer seemed genuine. But would it be enough for him to forgive and trust again? That night during dinner, Betty Johnson brought up the subject. Mr. Thomas, I've noticed you seem different after Megan comes here. Different how? More thoughtful, like you're considering something. Thomas sighed. Betty, do you think I'm a fool for still thinking about Jennifer? I think you're a human being, Mr. Thomas, and human beings can't just erase feelings overnight. But after everything she did, she's trying to fix herself. That doesn't erase the past, but it shows she recognizes her mistakes. Thomas looked at Betty Johnson with surprise. Betty, are you defending Jennifer? I'm not defending what she did, Mr. Thomas. I'm defending her right to try to be a better person. And I'm defending your right to consider forgiving if that's what your heart tells you. But what if she's pretending again? What if all this is just a more elaborate act? Betty Johnson thought for a moment. Mr. Thomas, a person can fake feelings, can fake interest, can even fake love. But it's very hard to fake change for so long, especially when there's nothing to gain from it. What do you mean? Miss Jennifer isn't trying to win you back. She isn't trying to get your money. She's trying to be a good mother to her daughter. What benefit would she have in faking that? Thomas had no answer for that question. Betty Johnson was right. Jennifer had nothing to gain by faking change if she wasn't trying to win him back. Betty, do you think I should look for Jennifer? I think you should do what your heart tells you, Mr. Thomas, but only after you're sure you've truly forgiven her, not just because you feel lonely. It was a wise observation. Thomas needed to examine his motivations before making any decision. 2 weeks later, Thomas made a decision. He asked Betty Johnson to find Jennifer's address and went to visit her without warning. The apartment was in a modest housing complex on the east side of New York City. Thomas parked his car and watched the building for a few minutes. It was simple, well-maintained, but very different from the standard of living Jennifer had experienced in his home. He went up to the 3rd floor and rang the bell. Jennifer opened the door and was completely speechless to see him there. Thomas, she managed to murmur. May I come in, Jennifer? She stepped aside, still in shock, and he entered the apartment. It was small but clean and organized. There were school books scattered on a makeshift table, and Thomas noticed they were Megan's. Isn't Megan here? He asked. No. She went to a friend's house to study for a test. Thomas, what are you doing here? Thomas looked around the apartment. There was no big TV, no expensive furniture, nothing that indicated Jennifer was trying to maintain a high standard of living. I came to see how you're doing. Jennifer sat on the simple sofa, still processing his presence there. I'm fine, working, taking care of Megan, trying to be a better person. Megan told me. You've been talking to her. She visits me from time to time. She's an impressive girl, Jennifer. Jennifer smiled for the first time since he had arrived. Yes, she is. She's much better than I deserved, but I'm trying to deserve her now. Thomas sat in the chair across from the sofa. Jennifer, why didn't you try to reach out to me these past months? Because you asked me not to, and also because I needed to prove to myself that I could change without any external motivation. What do you mean? Thomas, I realized that my whole life I changed to please men. I changed to please Robert. I changed to please the other men I deceived, and I was trying to change to win you back. I needed to learn to change to please myself. Thomas was surprised by her insight. And did you succeed? I'm trying. Every day I wake up and ask myself, what kind of person do I want to be today? And every day I choose to try to be a better person than I was yesterday. And how is that going? Jennifer sighed. It's hard, Thomas. Very hard. Sometimes I feel like giving up, going back to the easy life of lies and scams. But then I look at Megan and remember she deserves a better mother. Only because of Megan, Jennifer looked him directly in the eyes. Not just because of her, also for my own sake, because I discovered I don't like the person I was, and I discovered that through you. What do you mean? Thomas, when I was with you, pretending to be a good person, I realized I liked how I felt being that person. I liked being treated with kindness and respect. I liked having interesting conversations. I liked feeling valued for something beyond my appearance. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. Jennifer, but you were lying. I was lying about my past, about my situation, but I wasn't lying about how I felt when I was with you, and I realized I wanted to feel that way all the time, not just when I was pretending. And now? How do you feel? Jennifer thought for a moment. Now I feel real. For the first time in my life, I feel like a real person with real flaws and qualities. It's not always comfortable, but it's honest. Thomas fell silent, observing the woman in front of him. She looked different. She wore no makeup, her clothes were simple, and there was a serenity in her eyes that he didn't remember seeing before. Jennifer, do you miss the life you had before? I miss the financial security, I won't lie. It's hard to live with little money. But I don't miss the lies, the constant worry about being discovered, the fear that people would find out who I really was. And Robert? Robert shows up from time to time trying to convince me to come back. But I don't feel anything for him anymore. In fact, when I look at him now, I feel disgust for who I was when I was with him. Thomas stood up and walked to the small window of the apartment. Outside, children were playing in the housing complex's courtyard. Jennifer, do you still feel anything for me? The question came out more direct than he intended. Jennifer remained silent for a long moment. Thomas, I promised myself I would always be honest, so I'll be honest with you. Yes, I still feel it, but not in the same way I did before. What do you mean? Before, I felt a mix of true love with self-interest and fear of losing the comfortable life you offered me. Now it's just the true love. And also immense gratitude for you showing me what kind of person I could become. Thomas turned to her. Jennifer, do you understand that even if I believe you've changed, it doesn't erase what happened? I understand perfectly, Thomas. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. I lied about who I was and what my intentions were. You have every right to never forgive me. But would you like me to forgive you? Jennifer hesitated. Thomas, I would very much like to be forgiven by you. Not necessarily for us to get back together, but so that you could find peace, because I know what I did hurt you deeply. Thomas sat back down. Jennifer, if I were to consider forgiving you, if I were to consider that maybe we could rebuild something in the future, what would you say? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I would say it would be the greatest honor of my life to have a second chance with you, but only if you were certain that's what you want, not because you feel lonely or because you pity me. And how could we rebuild trust? Slowly, Thomas, with a lot of patience, a lot of honesty, and a lot of time. I wouldn't expect you to trust me immediately. I would earn your trust back little by little, proving every day that I've changed. Thomas was silent for a long time. Finally, he stood up to leave. Jennifer, I need to think about all of this. I understand, Thomas, and whatever your decision is, I will respect it. One last question. If I decide I can't forgive you, will you be all right? Jennifer smiled sadly. I will be sad, very sad, but I will be all right because now I have other things to live for. I have Megan, I have my honest job, I have the person I've become. I will no longer depend on a man's love to feel like a complete person. Thomas nodded and headed for the door. Thomas, Jennifer called out before he left, thank you for coming here. It means a lot to me to know that you care enough to want to know how I am. After leaving Jennifer's apartment, Thomas drove aimlessly through the streets of New York City. He needed to process everything he had seen and heard. The Jennifer he had met was different from the woman he had known before. She seemed more mature, more centered, more real. When he got home, Betty Johnson was waiting for him in the living room. "How did it go, Mr. Thomas?" "It was enlightening, Betty." "Is Ms. Jennifer well?" "She is. She really does seem to have changed. She seems like a different person." "And you? How do you feel after seeing her?" Thomas sat in his favorite armchair and thought about the question. "Confused, Betty, very confused. Part of me wants to believe she has changed and that we deserve a second chance. Another part is afraid of being deceived again. And which part is stronger? I think the part that wants to believe is winning, Betty, and that scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because what if I'm wrong? What if she's just acting better this time?" Betty Johnson sat on the sofa across from him. "Mr. Thomas, you can spend the rest of your life afraid to trust someone, or you can decide that it's worth the risk. But how do I make that choice? By following your heart, but without ignoring your head. If you decide to give her a second chance, do it slowly, with clear boundaries and a lot of honest talking." Thomas nodded. Betty Johnson always knew how to give the right advice. "Betty, do you think I should give her a second chance?" "Mr. Thomas, I think you should give the two of you a second chance. For her to prove that she has changed, and for you to prove that you can trust again." That night, Thomas barely managed to sleep. He kept thinking about Jennifer, about Megan, about his own loneliness and his chances of being happy again. The next morning he made a decision. End of story. And you? What did you think of this story of rebuilding and second chances? Leave in the comments if you believe that Thomas should forgive Jennifer and if people can really change. We want to know your honest opinion about this story of love, betrayal, and redemption. If you enjoyed the narrative, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories that warm the heart. Thank you for your company.